Aloha and welcome to Rose Yoga, Tapping into Heart Courage. Today I'm speaking with a wonderful healer from Mount Shasta, Lynneah Marks. She's a soul integration therapist, energy healer, author of 3 books, and today we're going to speak about her newest book, the Ghost Guiders book, Thirsting for Resolution. Lynneah, welcome. I've had the pleasure of meeting her in Mount Shasta and also receiving several wonderful healing sessions, all very different. And she's definitely a soul sister slash soul grandmother. And I'm so honored to have gotten to know you. And I'm so thrilled that you're joining me here today. Please feel free to introduce yourself and anything that guided you to write this book.
Well, good morning, Veruschka. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I have really enjoyed working with you and certainly enjoyed so many of your gifts and skills and appreciate you as well. I've been teaching earth healing classes for many years, and out of the earth healing classes have come on several occasions people who are really concerned about ghosts in their region. I used to call them disembodied spirits, but most people didn't know what I was talking about. So I've just gone back to using the word ghosts, which everybody has some idea of what that is. These are souls that are generally lost and not able to find their way. And this request has come out of my classes. And the last class said, we really are interested in this. We feel like this is our calling in the world, and we want you to do another class. So as I was preparing for the class, I got the idea that I should write a book about my ghost stories. And I thought, well, I wonder if I have enough stories. And I started writing, and I ended up with 25 different stories in this book that are all out of my experience, starting with the earliest one being when I was 14 months old. So the book is a companion to the class. It is also a standalone if you enjoy reading about ghosts and are interested in how to help them. The purpose of the book is to show ways to help these lost souls find their way back onto their path.
Beautiful. And I can't believe you're saying your first memory is when you were 14 months old. Is that what you
Yes,
just...
I would have thought it was later, but the situation was a situation that had a huge emotional imprint. My mother was pregnant at the time, and she had asked me to come into the basement to help pick up a Jello mold for my aunt. Basically, she was just trying to get me to walk around because I was so into using my legs and I was a little busy girl. So she had me come with her, and I remember really going carefully down the stairs, holding on the railing and holding her hand and walking down one step at a time. So I wasn't that well versed on stairs at that time in my life. And I saw a ghost in the basement. I said, "Mommy, who's that sad man?" And Mommy freaked out. She just let out a burst of energy, of fear, and that imprinted on me very strongly. She scooped me up in one arm and she slammed the refrigerator closed with her foot and had the Jello mold in the other hand and ran up the stairs and put me down and popped me on the butt softly and said, "Go in the living room and stay there until I call you." So the whole situation had a really, really strong effect on me. And she went and talked to my aunt and said, she whispered, but I could hear clearly from the other end of the house. I had good hearing. She said, "Lynn's seen a ghost." And I thought, ghost? Why doesn't she invite that sad man in the basement to dinner? You know, that I was upset with her that she wasn't inviting him. I thought he would be so much happier if he would join us for dinner. And when she said the word ghost, I kind of knew what a ghost was, but I didn't realize until that moment that those were some of the people I saw. And I started wondering at that moment, you know, how many of the people I had seen were ghosts and how many weren't. it was a moment of great confusion for me.
That is so interesting that you have such clear memories of that too. So when did you find out that you are, in fact, do you consider yourself like a ghost whisperer, or is that what a ghost guide is, to learn how to interact or invite them out of their situation?
Exactly. That's exactly what ghost guiders are about. Most ghosts are unhappy, they're sad, they're upset. And I think that that imprinted on my soul a desire to help spirits like that. Um, we found out that that man actually did die in the house. My aunt told my mother that my cousin, who was 15 years older than me, had also seen the man in the basement. So I had verification that what I saw was real very, very early in life. And they went and they found a picture of the man, and they had asked me to describe him, and I described him. I can still see him very clearly in my mind's eye, all the details, and that's all in the book. Um, and it verified with my cousin's vision of him also. And then they went searching for who had died in the house, and they found a picture of a man who was exactly the man that I saw in the basement. So I had a desire to help him at that time, and that desire continued. And I think it led me into a number of things in my life that have brought me to the place where I can help ghosts cross over or do various things to help them. I had my own near-death experience in 1975. So I had my own experience of my family ghosts and all the things that went into that experience. And that's in my first book, Thirsting for a Raindrop, which is a memoir. And it includes my near-death experience and childhood experiences other than the one we just talked about. So I have come to a place where after my near-death experience, it was much easier for me to see ghosts. You know, we go through life as children, we see ghosts easily. Many of the phone calls I get for people asking me to come and help them are because their children are seeing ghosts in the house. And I do provide that service, going to people's houses and helping them clear the ghosts out. And in one particular case that I'm remembering, a young boy about 7 years old was very distressed at the spirit who was coming to see him when he was in the shower. And his mother called me. She didn't really believe in all of this, but she said, he's so disturbed. He really needs help. And I understand that you do this kind of work. I said, well, I'll come and see what I can do. So it took a while for me to get the ghost to come and talk to me, but eventually he did. And he was a man who had lived in the house before, and he was not willing to cross over. He didn't want to meet his wife in the spirit world because they had not had a good relationship, and he had cheated on her. He had an affair with a younger woman, and he told me all of this. And I said, well, what if we talk to the angels and see if they can make a special portal for you where your wife will not be present? And he said, well, then I'd be willing to go. And I worked with angelic beings, asking them to create a portal for him that would be safe, where his wife would not be there. And they did so, and he crossed over. And the little boy never saw him again after that.
Wow. So that's very innovative to think about, having the interaction and then coming up with a solution that would make him willing. And that also brings up, did you guys ever resolve the sad man in your home basement? How did that get resolved?
Many years later, I went back there and resolved the sad man in the basement. And I showed him where his family was in the light, and he crossed over and went with them into the light.
Wow.
Yes.
So it sounds like the core of this whole topic is not about having fear around ghosts, but actually showing curiosity and listening to the spirit that's there. Or what is your main goal with this book?
Well, during the classes, we work on the 5 basic exercises from Rudolf Steiner, which anyone can download off of my website, which is bodysoulandangels.com. And it's under 5 basic meditations. These meditations were designed by Rudolf Steiner, who is the seer behind Waldorf education and anthroposophical medicine, and also biodynamic gardening. He was quite a genius, and he provided these exercises being totally safe exercises for anyone at any level of spiritual development. And they sound easy and they are simple, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily easy. They require concentration, they require strength of will, and they're kind of a gym workout for our intuition. So during the classes, I always ask people to work through these 5 basic exercises because they build our organs of perception in the spiritual world. So I have had people join my classes because they were told they had ghosts outside their house. They had no perception of them personally. But by the end of the class, they were absolutely able to perceive ghosts and were able to help them cross over. And one of the exercises that's really important is called equanimity of soul. And equanimity of soul is so required in these situations. We're given so many images of ghosts being so fearful and poltergeists, and very few ghosts are actually poltergeists. If you remember the movie Ghost, he had to work really, really hard to move things. So most of the ghosts that I've encountered are not able to move things. They're not poltergeists. They're usually very lost souls. Sometimes they're angry souls. And we have to do something to help them resolve their anger. And a lot of times that involves reading the Akashic records and looking at their past lives. I had one woman who wanted revenge. It was a situation where she attacked her husband counterattacked and killed her. And I had been called out to do a massage on him, and he was a very difficult man to relax. And usually I'm very good at getting people to relax on the table or off in meditations. And he was just the cat on the hot tin roof. He was up on his elbow trying to talk to me during the massage. He just wasn't able to relax. Well, that night after I saw him, I wasn't able to sleep. I had very, very interrupted sleep, and it didn't occur to me right away what was going on. I got up, I was very tired in the morning. I made it through my day. I had clients all day the next day, so I didn't have time to really sit and reflect about it. And the second night, I really wasn't able to sleep either. And I got a call from the hotel where I had done the massage for him. He had left an envelope for me, and I went and got it, and we had a conversation about some things, and he left me an extra tip, quite a generous one, and said that I should go and get this wine that I wanted for my anniversary that I thought was too expensive. So he gave me the money for that. And I thought, what a sweet thing to do. I really, really want to thank him. And I know the hotel wouldn't give me his address. So I started Googling him online, and all these articles popped up about how he had killed his wife. And I was a little shocked and realized right away that his wife was the one who was keeping me awake. So I went immediately to the meditation chair and said, okay, what do you want? And she came in so fast and furious. I want revenge. I want that son of a bitch put away. Blah, 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 blah. So I just meditated and asked my guides, how can I help her? And they said, show her the Akashic records. And it turns out that there were 13 lifetimes. He had killed her, she had killed him. He had killed her, she had killed him. It just repeated 13. This was their 13th time around. And when she saw that and she recognized the reality of it, she said, how do I stop this pattern? And I said, you forgive and you release. You let go. It doesn't really matter who started this. There was some reason that your souls contracted for that in the beginning. And neither one of you have gotten to the place where you have forgiven and let go. So you've had to continue to repeat and repeat and repeat. So she said, well, please show me how. So I led her through radical forgiveness. And we worked on looking at what the original contract was and what she was supposed to learn. And we called forward. We did a lot of different things that I do in healing sessions. I did with her just the same as I would with someone in the flesh. And she was able to resolve the entire issue and let go. And she went across with angels. I did ask for the portal to open for her. And I saw her go across with angels. And he was let off for involuntary manslaughter, which really was the right call because she had attacked him first. And it was a really interesting situation.
Wow, and that you had met him in the flesh. So how long does that take, that process, once you're communicating with the spirit and showing them the Akashic records and the radical forgiveness? Like, can you give an example of how long that process takes?
It varies a great deal on the willingness of the person that I'm working with. That's true in the flesh and it's true out of the flesh. In this case, she wasn't willing until she saw the Akashic records, but spirits who are in between, when they see the Akashic records, recognize the reality of them so quickly that they can shift on a dime. And she did. She just completely turned around once she saw the series of lifetimes. So the rest of the process probably took me about 2 hours with her.
Wow. And that was just by your own, on your own accord and your
It was so I could
generosity.
sleep. I slept well that night. She didn't bother me anymore.
Oh, wow. So, what do you feel like? Do you think that once people become sensitive to this, that it could distract them, that they're always tuning into it? Or how do you protect yourself from when you become sensitive or in tune with those kind of energies?
Well, there's a couple of blog posts on my website talking about sensitivity and how to decrease yours if you're overly sensitive. And, this is covered in the classes, it's part of the process. But most of the people who come to me are people who are already sensitive and they already see these things and they just haven't been able to get to the place where they are comfortable enough to deal with them. I have clients who've been followed around by spirits for a long time. I had one client who she had a highway in an apartment she moved into that was on ley lines. I have a friend who does ley line analysis, and there was a seminary and a convent that had ley lines that converged through her apartment. And this became kind of a highway for spirits looking for help. But the convent closed down and the monastery moved. So there was nobody there to help these spirits anymore. And they kept coming into her apartment. She came to my class because she'd been so disturbed by having so many spirits in her apartment. So we created a sign for her to put up. The metaphysician is in and the metaphysician is out. So she would flip the sign and she would call me and we would work once a month to help those who came and asked for help.
Wow, there's so much work to be done on so many unseen levels. That's so wild to imagine.
And
Um,
all of these energies are dense energies and they hold Mother Earth down. And one of my purposes in life is walking a spiritual path toward enlightenment in order to help with the ascension of the planet. That's one of my reasons for being here. So to me, doing this work with helping spirits cross over helps lighten Mother Earth and bring her closer to her enlightenment and closer to the ascension, which is going to happen for people and planet at the same time, as far as I understand at this point in my life.
So,
So,
so this book is to inspire other people to become helpers of lightening this load in their own domain.
yes, and not to be afraid that these are just souls that are lost.
Mhm.
You know, have you seen the movie Soul, the Pixar cartoon?
Yeah.
Isn't
Mhm.
that wonderful? The
Yeah.
land of lost souls is a very real place. They give a cartoon version of it. But that's where I find a lot of the suicide victims that people will come to me and say, you know, my son committed suicide. I know he's not at peace. I don't know where he is. I don't know how to help him. And I've learned how to be able to help those people. And there's a very special compartment in the spiritual world that's kind of an ICU for suicide victims. And with one woman, her son had been dead for a year and she still wasn't at peace because she knew he wasn't. And she came to me, and it took me a very long time to find him in the field of lost souls. He had judged himself and put himself in an igloo that was black in a black field. So it was very difficult to find. But eventually, working with the mother and feeling her heart energies and following them to him, I was able to identify where he was. Well, he wasn't going to talk to me. He didn't know who I was, except that his mother had called me in. And he was just completely collapsed in on himself, feeling that there was no hope for him, that he had killed himself, and he had killed himself under very extenuating circumstances in the armed services, where he'd been given drugs that did not do well for him, and the psychiatrist wasn't available to talk to him to change his dose and all this stuff. I mean, a lot of what happened to him was really beyond his control, beyond his abilities to deal with. So his condemnation of himself was quite inappropriate. But he was an avid Christian, and I called on Yeshua, which is what I like to call Jesus. And Yeshua came and talked to him and said, I don't condemn you. And he said, what? And he came out and he talked to Yeshua. And Yeshua was able to convince him that the only condemnation there was his self condemnation, that he needed to forgive himself. And he was able to do so with Yeshua's help. And then angels came and brought him into an ICU unit. And I checked in on that every day to see how he was doing. And the unit was all black and white in the beginning. It was like an old fashioned black and white movie. And he was in a bed and just laying in the bed. There wasn't much activity going on. And the next day I would check, and there would be maybe a flower that was in color. And I would think, oh, there's hope there. And the next day I'd check in, and there would be more color in the room. And eventually, when the room was completely technicolor, he had left the room. So this was a place for him to recover from his self-condemnation and all of those energies that were so difficult for him. And he was able to leave the room and to continue on his spiritual path. And his mother knew it. His mother could feel it. She was so connected to him. That kind of heart connection doesn't stop at death, it continues.
Mm.
So she was then at peace. So it was humbling, and I'm so grateful to be able to do this, despite the people who want to tell me that I'm crazy. You know, that's their prerogative. Um, but in my experience, it makes real changes in people's lives.
Mhm.
And that's the bottom line, is that people are able to live a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, and then does it, you kind of brought that up with Jeshua just now, of what people believe, like how do you know what that soul believed in order to kind of speak their language?
You ask, sometimes the family will give you that information, if you know the family. Um, there was a really interesting experience. I worked at the Enlightenment Center in Arizona, in Goodyear, Arizona, for a while. Lovely group of people there. That center is still going on. And they had a poltergeist come into a shop that was locked, and only 3 people had the keys. There was a lockbox on the front, which a lot of people had the code for, but the store had only 3 keys. 3 people could get in there. And one woman came in one morning and she thought, this is so unusual. There was a shelf that had rows of homeopathic preparations, and there were 5 deep and about 10 across. One of each of the last row was on the floor in front of the shelf. And she just looked at that and wondered, why would anyone do that? But she didn't say anything to anybody until later. And then the next day, she put the bottles back up on the shelf. And the next day, another person opened the shop, and there was a table in the center of the room that had cloths, beautiful silk cloths, hand painted, and leather work, little purses, and things of that sort. And the entire thing was turned upside down in the middle of the floor. And when she walked in and saw that, she called the woman who had closed the day before, who assured her that everything was in order when she left. But then she told her about the bottles on the floor. So they were both very curious and didn't know what was going on. So the third day, after the store had been completely put back into order, and there were 2 people there to verify that it was in order when they closed and locked the door, they came in the next morning, and inside of a locked cabinet, inside of this locked store, the entire second shelf was turned upside down onto the third shelf. And that was when they really freaked out, and they called the coordinator, and the coordinator told them to call me. I would know what to do. And they called me, and I said, well, I don't know if I know what to do or not. We'll see. I'll try. I'll see what I can do. So I went to my meditation chair and I tuned in, and immediately a spirit came forward right in front of me, very close. And I said, what do you want? And he said, I want enlightenment. You are the Enlightenment Center, aren't you? And I started to laugh. I said, yes, you're right. We are. And that is what we're striving for. How can I provide you with enlightenment? Well, he then gave me movies of a car accident where he was killed in the car accident very close to our center. The highway was not too far from the center. And he showed me, that he had died, and he was very concerned about his family. So I generally tune in, my intuition works pretty well most of the time. And I tune in and I ask, how can I help this man? That's what's on my heart, is how can I help? And the angels said, here, show him the Akashic records. And this time it was the Akashic records of his family since the car crash, how they had progressed through their mourning period, because it had already been a year and a half, 2 years since he died. And they showed him the entire record of his family up until the present time. And they were doing quite well now. And he just, you could feel the relief come off of him. Oh, they are okay. I said, yes, they're doing well. They went through their process, but they're doing well now. Are you interested in crossing over? And I explained to him what that process was like and what it was about. And he said, oh, yes, as long as they're okay. Can I come back and visit afterward? And I said, yes, you can. You can come back and visit after you've gone through your process. So I asked the angels to open a portal, and a bright golden light portal opened up, and he went through. And we didn't have any more poltergeist activity in the store after that. So.
Wow. What a story that he knew the name of the business, like, in ghost form, in spirit form, which, brings up the question, like, how many people actually stay earthbound? Like, if there's a 1 out of 10, I mean, if you had to guess, that would almost make people almost be fearful not to get too attached to something, before they pass. But it also often sounds like when people have sudden deaths, like a car accident or maybe being murdered by their husband, that, when it wasn't even when they didn't see it coming, that they may tend to get trapped more easily because they don't even know it happened. Like, how would you describe what would make someone, or how many people may be prone to staying a ghost?
I haven't done any kind of statistical analysis, so I
You
don't
know what
really
I mean, though?
answer that question, but enough to keep me employed and to keep me in classes. It happens frequently enough that there are lots of people out there who are having problems with ghosts and looking for someone to help them resolve that. So I have no way of saying what percentage, but what you just said is about attachments is very important. If people are at- attached to their physical life, then they're not as likely to go across. It seems that there is a period of time when a portal is open, and if you don't go and go through it, and I think that lasts for a few days, like say 3 days. Um, I don't know for sure that it's 3 days, but it's several days that the portal is open and the person has the opportunity to go across easily. And after that, the portal closes. And then they're kind of in this no man's land in between. Some people call it Bardo. Some people call it the land of lost souls. There's all kinds of different names for it in different religions and different spiritual practices. But at any rate, it's a soul that is not in the body any longer and has had some form of attachment, like the man who had the car accident. He wanted to know his family was okay, and he didn't know how to find them. He didn't know how to get there because his house was quite a distance from the place where he had the car crash. So he was looking around the area of the car crash for assistance, and he saw the sign that said Enlightenment Center, and he thought, oh, this is the perfect place for me. And he was probably trying to get our attention for quite some time, and we just didn't see him, hear him, until he started moving things around in the shop and doing them in a way that was just impossible to be a natural phenomenon. Earthquakes are not going to take the fifth bottle and put it neatly on the floor in a row. That it just, there was no explanation for that whatsoever, no natural explanation. And part of it is saying, okay, this is real, that there are more things than we know or that we have been taught or that we have been allowed to think are real. We get told in childhood, if you have an invisible ghost, well, yeah, for sure you have an invisible ghost. Nobody believes you. They treat it like, they don't treat it as a real thing. Certainly, my family had trouble treating the ghosts that I saw as real. It was very difficult for them. It was a hush hush whisper thing, my aunt whispering to my mother, and they didn't want to tell the rest of the family about it. And I was kind of curious about why they were so whispering and not wanting the others to know about it, because people jump to fear. They jump to fear right away rather than jumping to compassion or empathy or any other number of experiences that are helpful in this kind of circumstance. So I don't have any statistics for you, but it has a lot to do with how attached you are and how willing you are to go through your life review. The life review is not necessarily an easy process to go through. Depends on what you've done in your life. So talking people into crossing over is also talking them into doing their life review.
I had always been afraid as a sensitive child to see ghosts because I would always believe in stories. So I just was always praying, please don't ever show me something I don't want to see. So I was always like, please don't show me anything. And I ended up living at a private hot springs in the Lake, what's it called? Lake, no, Lake County area. And in its heyday, the turn of the century, all the wealthy people from San Francisco would go by carriage, for hours to the I want to call it Lake District, to Lake County, and to heal in all of the different springs there. And so apparently this hot spring had, a whole attic full of wheelchairs and crutches because people went there and actually healed and walked away. But some people also passed away there, in hopes to heal. So there were lots of ghosties there. So I had my firsthand experience of sensing the presence, of really feeling them. I even got myself to a point of being in the basement in the dark and sensing some real grief and learning to work with them a bit in my own ways. And it was interesting because I just felt like, wow, you could be a full-time employee here and working with these ghosts. But on that note, but I could feel a distinct removal of them if I asked them that they weren't welcome in that space. I could feel the shift. But I'm wondering about old places. Like I spent time in Pennsylvania, where the American Revolution took place, and there were lots of dense areas where there had been many battles. And a good friend of mine there said, oh, there are all these British soldiers there. They're walking through my living room. I'm constantly having to work with them. Now, if that's over, 200 years ago, how do you deal with places that are impacted by a big loss, like battles? How do you ever work with groups of souls?
Absolutely. And how I work with any of this is to tune in, to use my methods of discernment, because I think discernment is very important when you're using your intuition. Excuse me. And ask my guides for help. When I use my discernment, I'm confident of those who come to help me. And I ask them for help so that I'm working with those who are on the other side, also the ascended masters, the angels, the spirit guides. One of the largest, I lived on the East Coast for many years and was brought to many different battle sites. But the biggest one was Antietam. Antietam is in Maryland, and it is a place where they said the rivers ran red with blood. There were huge numbers of soldiers killed during the Civil War there. And I asked, how do I deal with this? I mean, it was just the battlefield when we went there was so dense with souls. It was overwhelming. And I thought, I could be here for years helping people across. How do I do this? I only have a few hours. So my guides guided me to set up tables, spiritual tables, and all the tables had scrying bowls. Do you know what a scrying bowl is? It's for those who don't know, it's these happen to be metal dishes filled with water, and they're used for divination. And there were chairs on either side of the scrying bowl, and the tables were long, all the way around the battlefield. And the soldiers, one from each side, would come to the battlefield, and they would be ushered in to one set of chairs, and they would look in the scrying bowl, and they would see their past lives. And generally, they'd been killing each other for lots of different lifetimes. They'd been going through wars as far back as Greece and Rome and beyond that times. And when they saw this in the scrying bowl, they would say, oh, how do we clear this? And as soon as there was willingness there, then the angels were able to say, you need to forgive and you need to let go. And they were able to forgive and let go. And then they started crossing over. And that clearing went on for more than a week. I didn't stay there. I had to get back home. But I was able to check in on it from a distance, because once I had the energetic, I could check in on it. And every time I checked in, the lines were shorter and shorter. There were very, very long lines of souls waiting to cross over. And the next time I visited that area, it had a totally different feel. I don't think all the ghosts were gone. I did work with a few individual ones the second time I went there, but I did a lot of the work. So it shifted the energy of the place dramatically. And I know there are other people who do this work too. Lots of people who don't want to talk about it. I meet them sometimes at parties. They're like, well, I don't usually talk about this, but, and then they'll tell me their stories. So there are other people who will also continue that work at various places. Gettysburg is another one that's been a big one to work on.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your effort, the unseen efforts, that people don't realize, with the people that are, actually contributing to cleaning up energetically and psychically the spaces we live in. To wind things up a little bit, just want to hear about, do you have any upcoming classes?
I am working on classes right now. There are going to be several levels of earth healing work, and then there are going to be several levels of ghost guiders. And I've been asked to put together a self-study guide for the Ghost Guiders book so that you could work through it on your own if you chose. And that's going to be quite reasonably priced. And that'll be a companion to the Ghost Guiders book, which is available on my website and also on Amazon. You can get it as an ebook or as a physical book, either way.
The companion sounds wonderful, and I'll also list the links in the comments. And I'm also really looking forward to chatting with you sometime about earth healing. And I think that's really fascinating, and to listen to some tips on hands-on practical magic for people to participate in their own environments. And I'm wondering if you would like to share any tips for people who are maybe going to bed in a new space and feel scared before they're going to sleep. Is there any little ritual or tips you can give to someone?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. Thirsting for a Raindrop, this is the part of my memoirs, and this is the second part, but they also include lots of stories about healing work and how I came to be a healer. And those are all available on Amazon. A really neat little ritual that I learned actually from Small. She wrote the book Behaving as if God and All Things Matter. And in there, she talks about asking the angels to bring a cloth, C-L-O-T-H, cloth, like a tablecloth or a bed sheet. And usually it's white, and you bring it up through the house and you ask for Saint Germain or whoever you work with to take it and transform anything that does not serve your highest good. And you just keep going with those cloths until you have cleared the space. And I do that whenever I go to a motel or an Airbnb or staying somewhere that's not my place. I do that as part of my ritual for clearing. I have an entire class on how to do that, but that's the easiest, simplest one that I can recommend.
Wonderful. I've never heard of that. Thank you. That's also very visual. And you're such a great storyteller. So hope people will check out your books. And is there also a way to get on your newsletter or anything for upcoming classes that you offer?
Absolutely. There's a sign up place on my website, and my email and my telephone number are on my website, and I do Stargate meditation every Tuesday night for healing us and Mother Earth, because whenever we heal us, we are healing Mother Earth. And that is a free service that I offer, and that's available if you want to check that out. Send me a text is probably the easiest way to get my attention, or send me an email. And if I don't answer the email, send me a text or call me. I get email.
Well,
Some things fall through the cracks, but
yeah.
I'll be happy to send you an invitation to the Tuesday night Stargate meditation.
What a generous offer and all the different beautiful offerings you have. Thank you so much for chatting with us today, and I look forward to sharing again.
Thank you so much, Veruschka. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Aloha.